There's a reason you never fit in. There's a reason the crowd never embraced you fully. Why you were always the other, even when your heart was pure. God says, you are different because I made you that way. This isn't a curse. It's a calling. You weren't overlooked by accident. You were set apart on purpose. When others chased popularity, you chased purpose. When they saw shortcuts, you saw sacrifice. When they laughed at the storm, you learned to dance in the rain. And that, right there, is where the separation began. God isn't interested in making you like everyone else. He never was, because He knows something no one else does. Your design was never meant to blend in. You were made to break patterns, to disrupt the cycle, to shift atmospheres. You carry light in dark places, and that makes you different. But don't confuse different with defective. What the world calls weird, heaven calls anointed. And God says today, that difference is your divine distinction. Have you ever seen an eagle fly with pigeons? Never, because the eagle knows its altitude would crush them. It doesn't mean the eagle is arrogant. It just means it understands its realm. You've been trying to lower your wings to make others feel comfortable. You've dimmed your light to protect their insecurity. But God is saying, no more. Stretch your wings again. Let them see what I created. You're not here to fit in their cages. You're here to teach them how to fly. And the truth is, they saw it in you before you saw it in yourself. That's why some rejected you. That's why they whispered. That's why they tried to copy your fire, yet doubted your flame. Because what God whispered to you in secret, they sensed in your silence. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man named Elijah, not the prophet, just a regular boy in a small town. Quiet, always thinking, always drawing instead of speaking. The other kids would laugh and say, "Why are you so weird? Why don't you play like us?" But Elijah wasn't weird. He was wired for something else. He saw things they didn't. He felt things deeper. He noticed the details no one else saw. And years later, when tragedy struck their town and people didn't know where to turn, guess who had the wisdom to lead them through it? The boy they called weird became the man they called wise. Your different will become your direction. Your loneliness has been training. Your pain has been purpose in disguise. Your tears, seeds. And God says, I collected every one of them because I knew what I was building. Maybe you've asked God, why can't I just be normal? But normal never changes the world. Normal never heals a nation. Normal never stands at the edge of the sea and parts it. Moses was different. He stuttered. He was exiled. He murdered a man. But God still said, "You will speak for me." David was different. Young, forgotten, mocked by his brothers. But God said, "You're my king." Mary was different. A young girl from a forgotten town. But God said, "You will carry my promise." So what makes you think your difference disqualifies you? It's your fingerprint, your calling card, your heaven-marked identity, and it terrifies the enemy.
You ever wonder why the attacks started early? Why the wounds came before the wisdom? Why the rejection came before the recognition? Because the enemy always attacks what threatens him most, and God placed something inside you that hell couldn't decode. So the devil thought, if I can't kill them, maybe I can confuse them. If I can't destroy their calling, maybe I can distract them with comparison. And that's where many lose themselves, trying to be like the rest. But you never fully could. Even when you tried, something always pulled you back. And that something was God. Imagine trying to train a lion to live like a sheep. You could dress it up, teach it to graze, even get it to bleat. But eventually, its roar will rise again, because that's what it was born to do. You were born to roar. God says, you weren't built to blend. You were designed to lead. You're not the echo. You're the voice. You don't need their approval to move. You don't need their applause to rise. You don't need their understanding to obey. What you need is already in you, placed there before time, activated by your yes. Another story. A girl named Layla spent her whole life thinking she was a mistake. She never looked like her family, never thought like her friends. She didn't fit in at school or church. She wrote poems no one understood, cried over things others laughed at. One night, she asked God, "What is wrong with me?" And that night, in a whisper so soft it made her weep, God replied, "Nothing is wrong with you. Everything is right about you. You're just early." Layla didn't know it, but years later, her poems would become songs that saved thousands from depression. Her tears birthed healing. Her difference became deliverance. So if you're reading this right now, hear this clearly. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're not too much. You're just built for something most people don't understand yet. God is building something in you that can't be rushed. And when it's ready, it won't need an introduction. It'll speak for itself. Because fruit doesn't announce itself. It just shows up. And you're about to bear fruit in places where others gave up. God says, "I've hidden you not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because what I'm releasing through you is rare. I had to make sure you were rooted before you were revealed." You're not being left behind. You're being launched. So stop trying to shrink to fit. Stop apologizing for your difference. Start walking like the one I created you to be. Start rising like the one I've chosen. Because this is why you're different. You've been marked. You've been molded. You've been made for more. You've always felt the weight, haven't you? The weight of knowing you're not like them. The weight of being the one who feels deeper, sees clearer, and hopes harder, even when everything screams give up. But God says, that weight is not punishment, it's preparation. Because not everyone can carry what you carry. Not everyone is wired to walk through storms and still come out singing. You were never meant to live easy. You were meant to live impactfully. Let me tell you a story. There was a girl named Kiara. She never blended in, no matter how hard she tried. In school, she laughed too loud, asked too many questions, and felt things others ignored. She learned to shrink herself so no one would point it out. But every time she tried to hide, something inside her ached. She didn't realize it then, but that ache was purpose, pushing through her silence. Years later, her words, those same loud, curious, passionate words, became the ones that lifted broken women out of depression. The same heart that once felt like too much became someone's reason to believe again. God had not made her extra. He had made her exactly. And you've tried to downplay your fire so others could feel warm. But God says, stop apologizing for what I lit inside you. You've been assigned to places where your difference isn't a defect. It's a doorway. A way into hearts others can't reach. A bridge between heaven and pain. A voice in a room where no one else speaks truth. You've seen the patterns, heard the quiet cries behind people's smiles, caught things others missed. Because I wired you like that. You're not too sensitive. You're spirit sensitive. You're not overthinking. You're discerning. You're not too emotional. You're deeply connected to what others have buried.
You're not like them because you're not called like them. And that's why your journey looked different from the beginning. Others were playing. You were praying. Others were mocking. You were dreaming. Others were laughing at the surface while you were drowning in the depths of purpose. Even as a child, you sensed you didn't belong where they told you to stay. You didn't know why, but heaven did. Because I had already marked you. That's why the devil came for you early. That's why betrayal hit you deeper. That's why silence felt familiar. That's why you always seemed to carry more than your age or your title should require. But you carried it anyway, not because you were strong, but because you were chosen. Let me tell you a story. There was a boy named Ezra. He loved being alone, not because he hated people, but because he felt things he couldn't explain. He watched others get invited, chosen, celebrated, and he waited, quietly. He used to ask God, "Why not me?" Years later, he found himself in a room of leaders, people who had risen fast but built on shaky ground. They didn't know how to hold pain. They didn't know how to last through failure. But Ezra, he had scars. Scars that taught him patience. Scars that gave him depth. Scars that made him safe. He wasn't overlooked. He was prepared. Some of you reading this feel like Ezra. You think your silence is punishment. You think your waiting is a waste. But God says, I'm growing your roots deep, because what I build in you can't be shallow. Others will rise quick and fall quicker. But you'll rise right. You'll rise when it's time. And when you do, you won't need to announce it, because the fruit will speak. You've been misunderstood, mislabeled, mistaken, but heaven has never been confused about you. While they were busy calling you too much, heaven was calling you exactly enough. While they ignored your ideas, heaven was downloading revelation. While they saw weakness, heaven saw worship. This is why you're different, because you've been touched by something holy, marked by something eternal, and that makes you dangerous to darkness. You don't fit in because you interrupt the pattern. Your presence breaks cycles. Your words carry weight. Your silence even speaks. You are not random. You are not strange. You are strategic. Let me tell you another story. A man named Levi had always been slow to speak. He didn't have the charm others had, didn't light up the room. But when he did speak, people stopped, listened, felt. He thought for years that his quiet made him small. But one day, someone stood beside him and said, "When you speak, I hear God. You don't talk a lot, but when you do, it heals something in me." That's when Levi finally realized God didn't make him loud. He made him loud in spirit. You don't have to be the noisiest to be the most powerful. Sometimes stillness shakes more than sound.
You are different because you're not carrying trends. You're carrying truth. And truth is timeless. Truth doesn't need to be popular. It just needs to be present. And you are present. In rooms filled with pretending, in hearts filled with wounds, in moments filled with noise, you carry stillness. That's why the enemy is threatened. He knows your silence can shatter strongholds. He knows your whisper carries weight. He knows your worship is a weapon. So let me say this to you plainly. Your difference is not a disqualification. It is your designation. Your scars are not shame. They are your sermon. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is your frequency tuned to the whisper of God. You don't have to change who you are to be used. You just have to stay surrendered. Because what God made in you is not meant to be tamed. It's meant to be released. God says, you're not meant to echo the world. You're meant to remind it of me. That's why you never fit their mold, because you were made in mine. You are different, because heaven breathes something into you that earth has never seen before. You don't need validation. You are the evidence. Walk boldly in your difference, because what I placed in you is sacred. And what's sacred will never be standard. You've noticed it, haven't you? That tug in your spirit, that quiet awareness that you don't quite see the world the way others do. While they chase titles, you chase truth. While they settle for surface, you crave depth. While they build platforms, you build altars.
You're not wired like them because you weren't sent like them. God says, I handcrafted you for something sacred, and that kind of design doesn't fit into man-made molds. Let me tell you a story. A woman named Elena worked in a small bookstore. She barely spoke, she wasn't flashy or loud, but people came in, drawn to something they couldn't explain. They would pour out their hearts at the register, weep beside her without knowing why, and she would just listen, pray silently, offer a word or two. She didn't try to be noticed, but heaven noticed her. Because she wasn't selling books, she was hosting presence. And one day, a man who had planned to end his life came in, sat across from her, and said, I don't know what this place is, but something here saved me. It wasn't the place, it was her.
You are the place. You are the place where peace walks in, where heaven touches earth, where people feel seen without needing to explain themselves. You carry an atmosphere that can't be copied because it was assigned. You wonder why some people open up to you too quickly, why strangers tell you things they've never told anyone, why others seek your voice when storms rise. It's because something in you feels like home. That's not accident. That's anointing. God says, I've made you different, so I can send you into places others can't go. Not to become like them, but to reveal me in a way they've never seen. You're not a mirror for the world. You're a mirror for heaven. And sometimes that means standing alone. It means losing the invitation. It means walking into rooms knowing you're not welcome, but going anyway because obedience outweighs comfort. You've done that. You've paid that cost. And heaven took note. The world taught you that blending in is safe. But God didn't call you to safe. He called you to significant. Safe doesn't shift atmospheres. Safe doesn't cast out devils. Safe doesn't lead generations into healing. You weren't made for safe. You were made for holy disruption. That's why your voice trembles sometimes when you speak truth. Not because you're unsure, but because the words carry fire. Heaven fire. Purifying, unrelenting, uncomfortable fire. Let me tell you a story. A young man named Zion worked backstage at a church. Never on the platform, never given a mic. He fixed lights, adjusted mics, cleaned chairs, and he did it with joy. One night after everyone had left, he stayed back and just worshiped quietly alone. What he didn't know was that the pastor had forgotten his Bible and came back in, only to find Zion face down, sobbing in the presence of God. That moment changed everything, because the pastor realized this young man doesn't need a stage. He already has an altar. God began to open doors Zion never asked for, because God lifts those who kneel. You don't need to demand a platform. Your difference will make room for you. When you stay faithful in hiddenness, heaven makes plans for your revealing. You don't have to scheme. You don't have to fight for a spotlight. You just stay aligned. And when the time is right, God says, I will put you in places where your difference is no longer questioned. It's needed. You've been the one who stayed behind, who prayed when others slept, who carried burdens no one else saw, who fasted in secret, who kept believing when the doors slammed shut. And it felt like no one noticed. But God noticed. He watched you carry the weight with no applause. He watched you intercede while others scrolled. He watched you pour out your heart while others poured into themselves. And he whispered, that one is mine. You are different because your obedience runs deeper than your emotions.
because your worship doesn't need music, because your faith still stands even when answers are delayed. That kind of faith isn't common. That kind of spirit isn't everywhere. It's heaven-breathed. That's why you can't fake your walk. That's why you can't pretend to be someone else, because your soul knows what it costs to become who you are. And that's what makes you unstoppable. This world doesn't need more trends. It needs more truth. It doesn't need louder noise. It needs deeper presence. And that's why God made you different. Because when others run after crowds, you run after His voice. When others compromise, you hold the line. When others quit, you whisper, "Not today." Because something inside you knows you were born for this. You don't have to prove your worth. You are already chosen, already sealed, already trusted by heaven with battles others would crumble under. And yet, you stood. You cried, but you stood. You bled, but you stood. You were misunderstood, but you stood. And now, your standing has become someone else's survival. God says, I made you different because I knew what the world would need when everything starts to shake. They'll need someone unshaken. That's why I built you like this. You're not ordinary. You're not weak. You're not forgotten. You are fire-tested, faith-rooted, spirit-led. This is why you're different. And your difference is not a problem. It is heaven's answer. You've been asking me, Lord, why do I always have to go first? Why am I the one who breaks the cycle, who carries the weight, who sees what others pretend not to see? And I say to you now, because I trusted you with it. Not because you were the strongest, but because you were willing. I placed something in you that can't be explained by logic. It's not learned in books or earned by effort. It's grown in quiet obedience, watered by surrender, and tested by fire. That's why your fire is different. That's why your yes cost more. Because what I'm doing through you is for more than just you. Let me tell you a story. A man named Jonas had every reason to give up. He was overlooked at work, forgotten by friends, and betrayed by someone he called family. Everything in his life screamed, "You're not enough." But still, he prayed. Not loudly, not with perfect words, but faithfully. Every night, with a cracked voice and weary heart, he said, "God, I trust you." He didn't realize it, but those prayers were building a wall around his family. He was standing in a gap no one else saw. Years later, when his daughter faced darkness, the prayers he sowed in silence became the bridge that saved her. Jonas was different because Jonas stood. That's you. You've stood when others ran. You've fought battles in secret. You've cried in rooms no one entered. You've covered others even while bleeding yourself. And now, God says, I'm raising you in the open because you were faithful in the unseen. You don't need applause. Heaven has already approved you. You don't need the crowd. You've been walking with the cloud. And wherever the presence goes, you follow. Even when it hurts, even when it costs you everything. That's why you're different. Most people only worship when they win, but you've learned to worship while waiting, to lift hands when answers are delayed, to trust when the path is dark, to sing even when your heart is breaking. You don't need comfort to be committed. You don't need clarity to be called. That's not common faith. That's covenant faith. And that makes you a threat, because hell can't control someone who still praises in the fire. Let me tell you a story. There was a young woman named Naomi who had every reason to walk away from God. Loss after loss, disappointment after disappointment. She gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left to give. But one night, alone in her room, she lifted her head and whispered, "Still, I choose you." It was quiet. No one saw it. No one posted about it. But heaven did. That night, God shifted something. Not in her situation, but in her soul. Her peace returned. Her clarity came back. And not long after, everything she lost, God restored double. Because sometimes all it takes is one whisper in the dark to shake the gates of hell. You've whispered those words too. Still, I choose you. Through heartbreak, through betrayal, through exhaustion, through the ache of unanswered prayers, you kept choosing Him. And that choice, that's what separates you. That's what makes you different. You didn't stay for what He could give. You stayed for who He is.
That's what heaven honors. You've been misunderstood because you see what others refuse to see. You call things out others avoid. You confront what they tolerate. You burn for things they forgot. And yes, it's lonely, but it's also holy. Because prophets aren't popular. Pioneers aren't always praised. Gatekeepers often weep in private. But still, they protect the path. You've done that. And now God says, I am about to lead people through the road you cleared with tears. You were the forerunner, the builder, the breaker of chains. You were different because you're not living for comfort. You're living for kingdom. That's why the conversations around you have changed. That's why your appetite shifted. That's why you can't go back to what used to satisfy you. Because once you taste purpose, nothing else fills you. Some people wonder why you're distant, why you don't engage the same way anymore, why your energy has shifted. And it's simple. You're not where you used to be. You've outgrown the shallow. You've left behind the crowd. You've set your eyes on something eternal. You don't want noise. You want presence. You don't want popularity. You want power. You don't want moments. You want movements. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Rule who stopped chasing after everyone else's idea of success. He stepped away from the platform, stopped trying to keep up with trends. He simplified his life and sat with God again. And in that stillness, the Lord whispered, "Now I can use you." Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is be still. Rule didn't chase influence, but influence came. Not because he forced it, but because he became what others were starving to see. Real, rooted, different. You don't need to try harder to fit in. You just need to rest in who you already are. You don't need to explain yourself anymore. You don't need to perform. You don't need to rush the process. Your difference is doing the work. It's cutting through the noise. It's drawing the right people. It's preparing the path for what's coming next. God says, you are different because your oil is costly. I've crushed you in private to raise you in power. And now, the season of hiding is ending. The season of wondering is closing. The season of questioning is being replaced with clarity. Because you finally see it now, don't you? You're not broken. You're not left out. You're not behind. You're chosen, you're covered, you're positioned. This is why you're different. Because you were never made to blend in. You were made to blaze through. You've probably wondered at times, why does it feel like I always learn the hard way?
Why does life teach me through fire, not comfort? And I want you to hear this clearly, because gold is not made in cool places. It's revealed through heat. You were gold, refined, tested, shaped, and your different path was never punishment. It was proof of the depth I'm building inside of you. You don't walk like the world because you don't belong to the world. You're not just built different, you're built for different. Let me tell you a story. A man named Andre always felt out of sync with his generation. While others celebrated distractions, he craved deeper things. He was never satisfied with surface-level conversations, never interested in clout, always asking, "Is this really all there is?" People called him boring, unimpressive, but Andre kept seeking me, in the quiet, in his questions, in his tears. One day, while walking past a man sitting alone on a bench, something in Andre's spirit stopped him. He felt a whisper, "Go speak to him." He hesitated. It felt awkward, but he obeyed. That conversation saved that man's life. He was about to take his own, but Andre's obedience interrupted it. You see, Andre's difference wasn't just for him. It was for others too. And so is yours. Your sensitivity? It's not random, it's a radar. It picks up cries others don't hear. Your stillness? It's not laziness, it's alignment. It keeps you in step with me. Your craving for depth? That's not being too intense, it's your spirit remembering where it came from. You don't fit the mold because the mold wasn't made for you. I didn't build you to blend. I built you to burn. That's why the enemy came for your voice. He tried to make you doubt your sound, tried to make you question your identity, tried to convince you that silence was safer. But deep down, you've always known. You carry something sacred. You carry revelation that makes demons nervous. You carry clarity that cuts through confusion. You carry a presence that heals atmospheres. This is why you're different, because you're not carrying information. You're carrying impartation. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman named Mariah. People always said she was too intense. She prayed too long. She believed too boldly. She expected too much from God. But she kept going. She kept praying over people when they didn't ask, kept fasting when no one else joined, kept declaring things that hadn't happened yet. And then it started happening. People began getting healed. Addictions broke. Families were restored. And suddenly, the one they mocked became the one they came running to. Her intensity wasn't too much. It was heaven's flame. You've been told you're too much too, haven't you? Too emotional, too serious, too spiritual, too deep. But here's what God says. You are not too much. You are the exact measure of what this generation desperately needs. You are their interruption, their wake-up call, their reminder that there is more than this world offers. And that's why you felt the pressure. Diamonds feel it too.
You've been in rooms where you had to pretend to be less just to make others feel more comfortable. You've dimmed your light so no one would call it pride. You've stepped back when you knew you were supposed to lead. You've held your tongue when truth burned in your bones. But no more. God is calling the real you to the front, the raw, the ready, the different. No more hiding, no more shrinking, no more explaining your fire to people addicted to the cold. This is the season where your difference will make the difference. Because you were made to shift culture, not conform to it. Speak life into dead places. Release healing where religion caused harm. Walk in rooms and carry the king, not just a brand. You don't just carry influence, you carry authority. You don't just speak with charisma, you speak with conviction. You don't just post for likes, you live for legacy.
That's different. Let me tell you a story. A young man named Kalen had a fire for truth. But every time he spoke it, people distanced themselves. They called him too harsh, too serious, too spiritual. And it hurt. But instead of watering it down, he pressed in deeper. He said, God, if I lose them but keep you, that's enough. And God honored it. Within a year, God connected him to a circle that burned the same. People who didn't just tolerate his difference, they understood it. Because when you stay faithful to who God made you to be, He aligns the right people at the right time. You're not hard to love. You're just hard to manipulate. You're not difficult. You're discerning. You're not distant. You're deeply rooted in things that don't entertain the shallow. You don't have to change to be accepted. You just have to stay planted long enough for your fruit to speak. And when it speaks, it'll speak louder than your explanations ever could. So hear this. You are not late. You are not off track. You are not forgotten. You are rising. You are being revealed. You are stepping into alignment. This is your moment to stop apologizing for being different and start owning it. Because heaven is raising voices, not echoes. Remnants, not replicas. Fire starters, not followers. You are one of them, and this is why you're different. You've carried questions in silence, not just about life, but about yourself. Why am I always the one who feels it first? Why do I notice what no one else talks about? Why do I carry the burden long after everyone else moves on? And I want you to know that's not weakness, that's spiritually depth. God says, I placed a watchman spirit in you. I gave you early sight so you could prepare the ground before others arrive. You're not slow, you're just set apart. You're not wrong, you're just wired different. You're not behind, you've just been walking a narrower road.
Let me tell you a story. A woman named Imani was always the one who felt everything too much. Crowded rooms made her anxious. She could pick up on people's emotions without a word being spoken. She would cry during worship when no one else did. She would wake up in the middle of the night praying for people she hadn't thought about in years. She thought she was emotionally unstable. Until one day, a woman she didn't know came to her and said, "Your intercession saved my son. I don't know how, but I felt it. God told me someone was praying, and now I know it was you." Imani wasn't unstable. She was spiritually sensitive, and that sensitivity made her powerful. You've been misread like that too. People labeled your depth as dramatic. They mistook your silence for pride, your boundaries for distance, your honesty for rebellion. But God never misunderstood you. He's been watching you carry what others refuse to even feel. He's been counting the times you said yes, even when it cost you relationships, opportunities, and comfort. That kind of yes, it can't be bought. It comes from the furnace. And those who've been through the furnace don't fear fire anymore. You've been called to walk where others hesitate, to stand where others sit, to speak when silence would be easier. That's why your voice carries weight. Even when you say little, it shifts the room, because your difference isn't about performance. It's about presence. You bring something heaven-shaped into every space you enter, and people feel it even if they don't have the language for it. Some are drawn to you, others resist you. And both are evidence that something in you disturbs the atmosphere, because you're not carrying normal, you're carrying holy. Let me tell you another story. There was a man named Elias. He wasn't charismatic, he didn't have a big following, but when he prayed, things happened. Sick people recovered, closed doors opened, heaven responded. He didn't seek influence, he sought intimacy, and that intimacy turned him into a walking altar. People came to him for advice, for prayer, for peace, because just being around him made them feel safe. Not because of him, but because of who walked with him. Elias was different because he carried God. So do you. You've learned to walk in rooms not to be seen,
but to carry the unseen. That's why you don't need to introduce yourself. Your spirit does it before your words ever start. That's why the warfare around you has been heavier, because the weight of what you carry is heavier. The enemy knows if you ever realize fully who you are, it's over for his plans. That's why he's tried to break your confidence, tried to isolate you, tried to wear you down with delay, disappointment, and confusion. But look at you, still standing, still believing, still becoming. God says your scars are sacred. Your process has been painful, but it has also been purposeful. You haven't been going in circles. You've been going deeper. Every delay has been a layer. Every loss has been pruning. Every rejection has been redirection. And now, the roots are deep enough. Now, the oil is thick enough. Now, the time is near. You were never just surviving. You were in training. That's why certain things broke your heart, but not your mind. That's why you felt crushed, but didn't lose your worship. That's why even in the silence, something inside you still kept whispering, God is not done with me? Because he's not. He's just now preparing to do publicly what he has been doing privately for years. And your difference will be the proof. Let me tell you one more story. A girl named Soraya had dreams that didn't make sense. She would see visions. She would hear things in prayer. She felt like she was crazy, until one day she shared something with her pastor, an image she saw in prayer. He wept. She had described something he had prayed in secret just the night before. That moment shifted her life. She wasn't crazy. She was prophetic. The very thing she thought was her flaw was her calling. And the same goes for you. You've been different since birth, set apart by situations you didn't ask for, marked by moments others missed. And God says, I allowed the separation early so I could build the strength secretly. You had to learn things the hard way so your compassion wouldn't be fake. You had to face certain rejections so your discernment wouldn't be shaken. You had to walk alone so your voice wouldn't echo theirs. It would echo mine. And now, you're ready. No more questioning who you are. No more shrinking in rooms you're called to shift. No more silencing your roar to keep others comfortable. You were made for the front lines. You were built for unusual obedience. You were designed to carry the weight of glory. So stop waiting for permission. You already have heaven's approval. You are different because you were made for more. You've noticed how certain things that thrill others never really satisfied you. While they were chasing applause, you were chasing answers. While they looked for stages, you searched for secret places. While they celebrated being seen, you longed to be understood. And even though it made you feel like an outsider, God says, that hunger wasn't rebellion. It was revelation. You weren't chasing attention. You were chasing me. You weren't running from the crowd. You were running toward your calling. And that pursuit, quiet, painful, misunderstood, has positioned you for something others can't carry. Because not everyone wants me like you do.
Let me tell you a story. A boy named Caleb grew up watching others dream small. No one in his family had vision. No one believed anything bigger was possible. But he did. Even when it made him look foolish. Even when they mocked him for fasting, for praying, for staying up reading scripture. He didn't follow the patterns. He followed the pull. Years later, when his city needed a voice of truth, Caleb, quiet, faithful, different, was the only one ready. His different became their deliverance. God says, you don't think like them because I didn't call you to live like them. You weren't made to be normal. You were made to be anointed. That means what satisfies others will feel empty to you. It means you'll feel things deeply while others laugh it off. It means you'll carry weight in rooms where everyone else is asleep in the spirit. But that's the cost of calling. Your burden has been heavier because your assignment is higher. That's why you've had to unlearn so much, Why you couldn't just sit in traditions that didn't carry truth. Why you couldn't keep pretending to be someone you're not. Because God is birthing something new in you, and it requires a vessel that is willing to be stretched. You've been stretched in your faith, stretched in your silence, stretched through heartbreak, stretched through delays. But that stretching was sacred, because God doesn't fill what hasn't been emptied first. Let me tell you a story. A woman named Delia once asked God, "Why do you keep stripping things away from me? Opportunities, friendships, doors I thought were blessings?" And God whispered back, "Because what I'm pouring into you has to flow through clean hands, and I had to remove what was contaminating your capacity." Delia didn't lose things, she was being prepared for increase. And when the new came, she was ready to carry it with maturity and purity. She was different, and so is your journey. Your journey has been slower because your roots had to grow deeper. You don't bloom fast, you bloom strong. You don't speak to impress, you speak to pierce. You don't show up to fit in, you show up to shift. And that's what hell fears, because your words don't echo culture, they echo conviction. You've paid the price in secret for oil others are trying to buy publicly. But oil doesn't come cheap. It comes from the press, and you've been through that press. That's why your worship sounds different. That's why your presence lingers in rooms. That's why people feel God even when you don't say His name. Because your life has become your ministry. Not just your words, not just your social media, not just your Sunday, your life. Let me tell you another story. A man named Elijah never had the most followers, the fanciest church, or the biggest budget. But when he walked into hospitals, people were healed. When he prayed over strangers, burdens broke. Someone asked him once, "How did you get this kind of power?" He smiled and said, "It's not power, it's proximity." He had spent years in the secret place, crying, repenting, listening, waiting, and now he was walking with God in ways others couldn't explain. That's your portion too. Your difference is creating a space for divine proximity. God doesn't give everyone the same assignments, and the deeper the assignment, the more isolated the process. You haven't been left out, you've been set apart. Not for punishment, for purity, because what's coming requires clean hearts, steady minds, and undivided loyalty. You've been called to carry it.
That's why you don't need to chase doors. God will open the ones you're called to. That's why you don't need to convince people. God will reveal you when the time is right. That's why you don't need to prove your worth. Heaven already declared it. You are not behind. You're not too late. You're not too broken. You're becoming. And what you're becoming is dangerous to darkness. You're different because you said yes when others said maybe, because you stayed when others walked away, because you trusted when there was no proof, because you believed God over the noise. You didn't need confirmation to stay faithful. You didn't need evidence to keep praying. You didn't need applause to keep walking. That kind of faith is rare, and rare things are treasured in the kingdom. God says, you've been tested, not to break you, but to reveal what can't be broken. And now I'm breathing on the places that have been quiet. I'm resurrecting what looked forgotten. I'm restoring what was stolen, because your difference isn't just surviving, it's about to speak. And when it does, every delay will make sense. Every tear will feel holy. Every silent night will echo with purpose. This is why you're different, because what's in you was never meant to look like the rest. Look at the journey you've walked. Every season that didn't make sense. Every door that shut while others were opening theirs. Every tear that felt wasted. Every moment where you thought, maybe I'm not enough. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still standing, still believing. Not because life has been easy, but because your spirit was built by the hands of a master potter. God shaped you differently because your purpose carries a weight most couldn't carry. You weren't made to be understood by everyone. You were made to stand out. Let me tell you a story. There was a girl named Eden. She was always drawn to quiet places, deeper prayers, longer pauses. While others wanted to be seen, she wanted to see God. But for years, she felt invisible, like her devotion didn't matter, like her prayers weren't heard. Until one day, a child in her church walked up and said, "When I grow up, I want to worship like you. You make me feel like God is near." That's when Eden realized it was never about being loud. It was about being real. Her difference wasn't distance, it was depth, and it reached further than she ever knew. You've done the same. You've reached people who never told you, inspired souls who never liked or commented. You've stood for truth when it cost you connection. You've kept walking when the map disappeared. And now, God says, I am bringing you into a season where your difference will be seen not as a mystery, but as a miracle. No more explaining what makes you tick. No more justifying why you don't move like them. No more shrinking your fire to make others feel safe. You were born to blaze a trail. You've cried in hidden places, worshipped through wounds, grown roots in dry soil, and it's all counted. Heaven never missed a moment, not one tear, not one prayer, not one sacrifice. They were seeds, and harvest is near. The enemy tried to convince you that your uniqueness was isolation, but it was always invitation. An invitation to carry heaven in a way that breaks patterns, lifts chains, and shifts generations. You don't need to become more like them. You need to become more like you, the version of you that heaven dreamed before you were ever born, the version that doesn't apologize for being called, the version that walks boldly in authority, the version that is free.
Let me tell you something personal now. God didn't just save you for you. He preserved you for others. He set you apart because there are people connected to your obedience. You are someone's answered prayer, someone's reminder that faith still exists, someone's sign that God is still writing stories no one expected. And that makes you different. You carry words that restore hope. You carry eyes that see pain and don't look away. You carry hands that heal without needing credit. You carry a voice that trembles but still speaks. Because your difference isn't just personality, it's purpose. And that purpose has been growing quietly under pressure. But now it's rising. God says, you've passed through fire, but not to be burned. You walked through the night, but not to be lost. You stood alone, but not to be forgotten. You are stepping into a season where your difference becomes the door. People will follow your fire. They will drink from your well. They will ask, how did you survive that storm? And your answer will be, I didn't survive because I'm strong. I survived because I'm surrendered. You don't need to fight for space anymore. You are the space where glory rests, the space where chains fall, the space where heaven touches earth. You don't need to look for the spotlight. You were already lit from the inside out. So rise, unapologetically,
unashamedly, unstoppably. Because this world is desperate for something real, and you were made to be that. You were different because God made you to be a voice, not an echo, a fire, not a flicker, a movement, not a moment. This is why you've walked through what you did. This is why you carry what you carry. You are not ordinary. You are chosen. You are marked. You are trusted. Heaven knew what it was doing when it made you different. Now, so do you.